April is the month most people ignore. While your neighbors are complaining about grocery prices and sharing outrage clips about tariffs on social media, you could be planting 17 crops that will slash your food bill in half before the price hikes even hit. And the difference between planting now versus waiting until summer isn't just a few dollars saved here and there. It's the difference between control and helplessness, between feeding your family on your own terms and standing in a checkout line watching the total climb past $200 for a single cart of basics. Here are the 17 most productive crops you must plant in April before tariffs make groceries unaffordable. Number 1, tomatoes. Tomatoes transplanted into the garden in April will produce hundreds of pounds of fruit from midsummer through fall, replacing one of the most overpriced items in the grocery store, where a single tomato now costs $3 and climbing. And while most people buy sad, flavorless tomatoes shipped from thousands of miles away, your backyard plants will produce better tasting fruit for pennies per pound. Transplant hardened-off seedlings into the garden after your last frost date. Space them 24 inches apart in rich, well-composted soil. Stake or cage them immediately, because once they start growing, they won't stop. And plant deep, burying 2/3 of the stem, because tomatoes develop roots all along the buried stem, creating a stronger, more productive plant. Mulch heavily to retain moisture and reduce disease splash. Number 2, peppers. Peppers planted in April will produce from midsummer until the first frost, giving you months of fresh, sweet, and hot peppers for cooking, salads, and preserving. And with imported pepper prices expected to spike as tariffs hit Central American and Mexican produce, growing your own means you won't even notice the increase. Transplant seedlings outside. Once nighttime temperatures consistently stay above 55 degrees Fahrenheit, space them 18 inches apart in warm, well-drained soil. And don't rush this, because peppers are tropical plants that will sulk for weeks if exposed to cold nights, setting you back further than if you just waited a few more days for warm soil. Add a handful of bone meal to each planting hole for strong root development. Number 3, green beans. Green beans planted directly in April soil will produce their first harvest in just 50 to 60 days, making them one of the fastest returns on your gardening investment. And beans are one of those crops that get more expensive every single year at the grocery store, while somehow getting less fresh. Because by the time store-bought beans reach your kitchen, they've been picked, shipped, warehoused, and displayed for days. Yours will go from vine to plate in minutes. Sow seeds 1 inch deep and 3 inches apart in rows or blocks. Provide a trellis for pole varieties, which produce 3 times more beans than bush types in the same space. And here's the real advantage. Beans fix their own nitrogen from the air through bacteria in their root nodules, which means they actually improve your soil while they grow, feeding the next crop you plant in that spot. Number 4, cucumbers. Cucumbers sown directly in April in warm soil will produce prolifically from early summer through fall. And a single cucumber plant can produce 10 to 20 fruits over the season, which at current grocery prices of $1.50 to $2 each means one plant pays for your entire seed packet many times over. And as tariffs drive up the cost of imported produce, that math only gets better. Sow seeds 1 inch deep in hills or rows after the soil has warmed to at least 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Space plants 12 inches apart on a trellis, which keeps the fruit clean, straight, and off the ground where slugs and rot can ruin them. Water consistently, because inconsistent watering causes bitter, misshapen fruit that nobody wants to eat. Number 5, zucchini and summer squash. Zucchini planted in April is so productive that your main problem won't be growing enough. It will be figuring out what to do with the avalanche of squash that starts in June and doesn't stop until frost. And that's exactly the kind of problem you want when grocery prices are climbing every month, because one zucchini plant can produce 6 to 10 pounds of food per week at its peak. Sow seeds 1 inch deep in hills of enriched soil, spacing plants 36 inches apart because they need room to spread. Harvest when fruits are 6 to 8 inches long, because bigger isn't better with zucchini. The small ones are tender and flavorful, while the massive ones turn woody and seedy. And check your plants daily, because zucchini can go from perfect to baseball bat overnight. Number 6, lettuce and salad greens. Lettuce sown in April will give you fresh salads in as little as 3 to 4 weeks, making it the fastest grocery savings you can plant. And with a head of organic romaine now pushing $4 to $5 at the store, a single $2 seed packet that produces dozens of heads starts looking like the best investment you've ever made. Sow seeds thinly in rows or broadcast across a bed. Barely cover them with soil because lettuce needs light to germinate. Keep the soil consistently moist and thin seedlings to about 6 inches apart, or harvest as baby greens and let the remaining plants fill the gaps. And succession plant every 2 weeks so you have a continuous supply instead of a feast followed by nothing. And here's why these first 6 crops matter more than you think. They represent the produce aisle essentials that absorb the biggest tariff-driven price increases. Because tomatoes, peppers, beans, cucumbers, squash, and lettuce are the items that fill your cart every single week. And when tariffs add 10, 20, or even 30% to imported food costs, these 6 crops alone can save a family $50 to $100 per month. That's not a gardening hobby. That's a financial strategy. Number 7, potatoes. Potatoes planted in April are the ultimate food security crop because they produce more calories per square foot than almost anything else you can grow. They store for months without processing, and they're one of the staple foods most vulnerable to price increases. Because potatoes require fuel-intensive harvesting and transportation, and tariffs on equipment, fuel inputs, and imported varieties all push that price higher. Plant seed potatoes 4 inches deep and 12 inches apart in trenches or raised beds. As the plants grow, hill soil around the stems every few weeks to encourage more tubers to form along the buried stem. And choose a mix of early, mid, and late season varieties so your harvest stretches from June through October. Cure harvested potatoes in a dark, cool location for 2 weeks before storing, and they'll keep through the entire winter. Number 8, carrots. Carrots sown directly in April will produce sweet, crisp roots in 70 to 80 days. And while a bag of carrots at the store might still seem cheap today, the quality difference between a homegrown carrot pulled fresh from the soil and a store-bought carrot that was harvested weeks ago is so dramatic that you'll never go back. Sow seeds 1/4 inch deep in loose, stone-free soil. And be patient because carrots are slow to germinate, sometimes taking 2 to 3 weeks. Mix the tiny seeds with sand to help distribute them evenly, thin seedlings to 2 inches apart. And resist the urge to skip this step because overcrowded carrots produce twisted, stunted roots instead of the straight, thick ones you want. Mulch between rows to prevent the tops from greening. Number 9, beets. Beets planted in April give you 2 crops in one because you eat both the roots and the greens, which makes them one of the most efficient uses of garden space when you're trying to offset grocery costs. And beet greens are more nutritious than spinach, packed with iron, vitamins, and minerals, yet most people throw them away because they don't realize they're edible. Sow seeds 1 inch deep and 3 inches apart, thin to 4 inches when seedlings are 2 inches tall. And here's what most people don't know. Each beet seed is actually a cluster of multiple seeds, which is why you'll always need to thin them, regardless of how carefully you sow. Use the thinnings as microgreens in salads rather than composting them. Number 10, herbs. A dedicated herb planting in April will save you more money per square foot than almost any other crop in your garden. Because fresh herbs are one of the most absurdly overpriced items in any grocery store. A tiny plastic clamshell of basil costs $3 to $4 and wilts within days. Meanwhile, a single basil plant that costs pennies to grow from seed will produce fresh leaves from May through October. Plant basil, cilantro, dill, and parsley from seed directly in warm April soil. Transplant perennial herbs like rosemary, thyme, oregano, and mint as starts. And here's the long-term play. Those perennial herbs come back year after year with zero effort, which means you plant them once and never buy them again. That's not just savings, that's a permanent reduction in your grocery bill that no tariff can touch. Number 11, sweet corn. Sweet corn planted in April will give you ears in midsummer that taste nothing like anything you can buy in a store. Because corn starts converting its sugars to starch the moment it's picked, and store-bought corn has been off the stalk for days or even weeks. Yours will go from garden to boiling water in minutes, and the difference is extraordinary. Plant seeds 1 inch deep and 8 inches apart in blocks of at least 4 rows rather than a single long row, because corn is wind-pollinated and needs neighboring plants to produce full, well-filled ears. Water heavily when tassels appear because this is when the ears are forming, and drought stress means missing kernels and disappointing harvests. Number 12. Kale. Kale transplanted in April will produce continuous harvests from late spring through the following winter, making it one of the longest producing crops in your garden. And kale is virtually indestructible, tolerating heat, cold, poor soil, and neglect better than almost any other vegetable. Which means, once it's established, it just keeps giving even after frost, even after snow, even after you've forgotten about it entirely. Transplant seedlings 18 inches apart. Harvest by cutting the lower outer leaves while letting the growing tip continue to produce new ones. And don't harvest more than a third of the plant at once because kale needs its leaves to photosynthesize and keep growing. One planting in April can feed you for 8 to 10 months straight. And now here's where it gets interesting, because the next 5 crops are the ones that separate people who dabble in gardening from people who actually insulate themselves against rising food costs. These are the crops that store, preserve, and multiply. Number 13, onions. Onion sets or transplants planted in April will be ready to harvest by midsummer and will store through the entire winter, giving you a year's supply of one of the most essential cooking ingredients from a single planting. And onions are in virtually everything you cook, which means every onion you grow is one less you buy at a store where prices are climbing by the month. Plant sets or transplants 1 inch deep and 6 inches apart in well-drained soil. Stop watering when the tops begin to fall over, and cure harvested onions in a warm, dry, airy spot for 2 weeks until the outer skins are papery and the necks are completely dry. Properly cured onions will store for 6 months or more in a cool, dark location. Number 14, garlic. If you missed the fall planting window, April is your second chance to get garlic in the ground. And while spring-planted garlic produces slightly smaller bulbs than fall-planted, it still gives you a harvest that stores for months and costs pennies compared to the $5 to $8 per pound that organic garlic sells for in stores. And with tariffs threatening to raise prices on imported garlic from China, which supplies nearly 80% of the world's garlic, growing your own isn't just smart, it's essential. Break apart a bulb into individual cloves, plant them 2 inches deep and 6 inches apart with the pointed end up, mulch with straw, and let them grow through spring and summer. Harvest when the lower third of the leaves have turned brown. Cure for 2 weeks in a shaded, airy location and store in a cool, dry place. Number 15. Winter squash. Winter squash planted in April will produce dense, calorie-rich fruits that store for months in a cool location without any processing, canning, or freezing. And varieties like butternut, acorn, and spaghetti squash can last 3 to 6 months in proper storage, meaning your April planting feeds you through the entire winter when grocery prices are historically at their highest. Sow seeds 1 inch deep in hills of compost-enriched soil. Space plants 4 to 6 feet apart because winter squash vines sprawl aggressively. And be patient, because unlike zucchini, winter squash takes 80 to 110 days to mature. Let the fruits cure on the vine until the stems are dry and corky, then store in a single layer in a cool, dry room around 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit. Number 16. Peas. Early peas sown directly in April soil will be ready to harvest in late spring and early summer, giving you one of the sweetest, most satisfying crops in the entire garden. And there's nothing like fresh peas eaten straight from the vine, so tender and sweet that they rarely make it from the garden to the kitchen because you eat them all while picking. Sow seeds 1 inch deep and 2 inches apart in double rows. Provide a trellis or support because even dwarf varieties produce better when they can climb. And plant them on the north side of your garden so they don't shade shorter crops as they grow. Succession plant every 2 weeks for a continuous harvest instead of getting everything at once and then nothing. Number 17. Radishes. Radishes are the secret weapon of the April garden because they're ready to harvest in as little as 25 days, making them the fastest crop from seed to plate. And while they might seem like a small, insignificant vegetable, radishes serve a critical purpose beyond eating. They break up compacted soil for other crops. They mark slow germinating rows like carrots so you know where you planted. and they fill gaps between larger plants that would otherwise grow weeds. Sow seeds 1/2 inch deep and 1 inch apart, thin to 2 inches. And harvest promptly when they reach the size of a large marble, because radishes left in the ground too long turn woody, hollow, and spicy in the worst way. Succession plant every week for a steady supply. These 17 crops represent the foundation of a garden that doesn't just feed you, it protects you. Because tariffs aren't a temporary inconvenience, they're a structural shift in how food is priced. And every week you delay planting is a week closer to paying prices that didn't exist a year ago for the same produce you could grow in your own backyard for nearly nothing. April isn't a month for worrying about grocery bills, it's a month for planting. Because every seed you put in the ground today is a vote of independence from a food system that charges you more while giving you less. The people who thrive through price increases aren't the ones who complain about tariffs. They're the ones who planted 17 crops in April while everyone else was arguing about politics. April is the month that separates the people who talk about saving money from the people who actually do it.